Ladies and gentlemen, there comes a moment in every man's life, perhaps even this very moment, when the mirror no longer reflects a face of potential, but a face of compromise. You look at yourself and you don't see who you could be, only who you've settled to become. And I ask you, is that the life you intended? Listen carefully. Every excuse you have ever used has one thing in common. It has protected your current reality while burying your future in silence. Excuses are not harmless. They are poison with a pleasant flavor. They steal your time, dull your fire, and whisper comforting lies until years have vanished into dust. You are not tired. You are uninspired. You are not unworthy. You are undisciplined. And you are not stuck. You are surrounded by habits, choices, and beliefs that no longer belong to the version of yourself you're trying to become. This speech is not comfort. It is confrontation. Because you don't need motivation. You need a funeral for the person you no longer wish to be. If you stay until the end of this, something inside you will break, and then rebuild. You will understand why your future demands your transformation, not your excuses. You'll be handed a mental weapon, not a pillow. This isn't about improvement, it's about rebirth. The old self must die so the unrecognizable self can rise. Stay with me. Your revolution begins now. Listen to me, and listen as if your very future depends upon it, for it does. There is a common thief that slips into the sanctuary of human ambition and steals more dreams than poverty, more talents than misfortune, and more victories than outright defeat. That thief has 1,000 disguises and a velvet tongue. Its name is excuse. Excuses are not merely reasons. They are the carefully tailored garments with which we dress our fears, the comfortable cushions upon which we rest while the hours of our life pass by. If you would become unrecognizable, if you would remake yourself into a person of power, influence, and unshakable accomplishment, you must begin by exposing this thief for what it is and removing every garment it uses to hide. You will find men and women of purpose who once bowed before the altar of excuse, and when they broke those chains, the world made room for them. I tell you plainly, an excuse is only an accepted justification for failure. It pleases you in the moment because it spares you the cold labor of decision and shields you from the awkwardness of beginning. But each excuse you accept deposits a small death in your character. One by one, these deaths accumulate until the life you imagined is buried under a mountain of reasons. How many noble intentions have been strangled in their infancy because the would-be mother of those intentions said, "Not now, later, when I have time, when I have money, when the conditions are favorable"? These are not reasons. They are luxuries purchased with the currency of your life, and the currency is finite. Begin at once to scrutinize your language. The words you speak are the fingerprints of your destiny. When you say, "I can't," you build a prison. When you say, "I will," you begin to lay the foundations of a temple. Notice how often your excuses wear the mask of truth. "I don't have the time" becomes the slogan of the idle. "I lack the education" is the whisper of the timid. "Circumstances are against me" is the battle cry of the defeated. Stripped of their poetry, these phrases mean only one thing. You prefer comfort to growth. Comfort is a slow poison. It keeps you warm while it freezes your potential. Now, understand this essential principle. Excuses are not external events, they are internal decisions. You are not the product of events alone, you are the product of your reactions to those events. Two men can face the same storm but arrive at different harbors. One becomes bitter and broken, the other becomes bold and brilliant. The difference is not fate, it is choice. Choose then to be sculpted by your choices and not by your circumstances. If you hold to the convenient belief that life happens to you, you will never stand in the full sunlight of responsibility. Responsibility is the furnace in which character is forged. Take it willingly, and you will find strength you never suspected. There is a practical method by which you can starve the habit of excuse. Adopt it with the same determination you would use to master any craft. First, acknowledge the falsehood. Place your excuses on the table, one by one, like contraband, and inspect them closely. Call them what they are, lies disguised as explanation. When you have named them, they lose their magic. They become objects to be examined and discarded rather than invisible chains you accept. Second, convert the surrender of excuse into the declaration of purpose. Formulate a clear and burning goal, a definite object of desire that makes every excuse trivial by comparison. When your desire is vivid and real, excuses evaporate under its heat. Third, take immediate, specific action. Not tomorrow, not next week, but now. The cure for an excuse is a single step. Do one thing today that moves you toward your goal. No matter how small, that step will teach your mind a new language, the language of doing. Let me warn you against the peril of substitution. Many who seek to eliminate excuses simply replace them with other subtler forms of self-deception. I am preparing, they say, when in truth they are procrastinating. I am refining my plan, when in truth they are perfecting an illusion in which they never act. Beware the improvised shrine of preparation. Preparation becomes virtue only when it results in decisive action. Do not hide behind the sacred cloak of readiness. Move. Learn by doing. Failure will instruct you more than infinite preparation ever will. Cultivate the habit of self-accountability. Keep a ledger of your excuses. At week's end, review it with the unblinking eye of a judge. You will be surprised how often the ledger reads like a comedy of errors. Replace each recorded excuse with a counteraction, what you did instead, and what you will do next time to prevent the same evasion. This ritual creates a new muscle in the spirit, the muscle of fortitude. Fortitude is nothing mystical. It is formed through repeated refusal to concede to the easy lie. Surround yourself with influences that make excuses intolerable. There are people whose presence is a tonic. They refuse to offer solace to weakness. There are others who will applaud your excuses and thereby feed their power. Choose, then, the company that commands excellence. The environment is an amplifier of character. If you live among the complacent, your excuse will sound like a choir. If you associate with the resolute, your excuse will sound like a whisper. Introduce into your life mentors and companions who will challenge your rationalizations and demand evidence of progress. Let no man or woman in your circle be permitted to applaud your retreat when your role is to advance. You must also learn to transmute dissatisfaction into design. Too often we feel the discomfort of our present and consent to it because the pain of change seems greater than the pain of continuity. This is a miscalculation of the basest kind. Calculate instead the long-term cost of a life lived in the accommodations of excuse. Picture your future in unflinching detail if you permit these habits to persist. Then imagine the future that will unfurl if you kill the excuses and refuse to revive them. Pain, when refused, becomes purpose. Purpose, when embraced, annihilates excuse. Permit me to address the grand adversary, fear. Excuse is the shadow cast by fear. Fear invents possibilities of failure and hands them to the tongue as reasons. But fear is not an oracle. It is an advisor of the lazy. You must train yourself to act in the presence of fear. Let fear be the drumbeat that signals you to move rather than the governor that halts your carriage. Boldness does not require the absence of fear. It requires the supremacy of will. Will is fed by discipline. Discipline is the daily subordination of the immediate pleasure to the greater long-term gain. It is the refusal to capitulate to the soft sirens of ease. Remember the principle of tiny beginnings. The conquest of excuses does not depend upon grand schemes at first. It depends upon simple, persistent action. The person who becomes unrecognizable begins with the first honest act of refusal against excuse and follows it with another and another until a new identity is established. Habit forms silently, but it is relentless. Let your new habits be the architects of your identity. Let small victories accumulate until the old self is a memory and the new self is the daily truth. I urge you to make a pact, here and now. Promise yourself that you will never again speak an excuse without immediately countering it with a plan. When you say, "I have no time," immediately follow with, "I will rise 30 minutes earlier and use them." When you say, "I cannot afford it," reply, "I will find one way this week to earn or reallocate funds." Combat the default of despair with specific contracts to act. The mind obeys structure. When you bind your excuses with the chains of plan and action, they will rust and crumble. Finally, treasure the principle of persistence. Excuses are patient predators. They will test you at every turn. They will come not only in your youth, but in seasons of fatigue, disappointment, and sudden success. They wear many masks: illness, obligations, the judgments of others, the seduction of ease. Persistence is the engine that drives you through these deceptions. It is the repeated affirmation that your purpose matters more than your present mood. Persistence is not dramatic. It is a series of small, habitual acts that over time produce irresistible momentum. Hear me plainly, To kill the excuses is to take up the scalpel of self-examination and cut away the dead tissue of indulgence. It is to stand naked before your own conscience and choose with a warrior's resolve the path of action. The man who delights in excuses will never know the exhilaration of becoming unrecognizable. The man who kills them will look back one day and hardly recognize the person he was, and he will be grateful for the incineration. And so you ask, what now? If excuses are the padded walls of your self-imposed prison, then let's talk about the next logical step, the breakout. Because it's not enough to tear down excuses and declare your old beliefs bankrupt. If you stop there, you'll be left in the ruins with no structure to house your future. You must now confront something far more terrifying than failure, and that is the death of who you've been up to this moment. This is not poetic metaphor. This is practical truth. Reinvention demands a funeral. The identity you've worn, the one shaped by comfort, by fear, by excuses, by the story you keep repeating to yourself, that identity has to die. Not later, now. Because that version of you has built habits for survival, not for growth. It has aligned itself with limitation, not expansion. And as long as you cling to that former self, as long as you defend it, even quietly, you will sabotage every attempt at genuine transformation. People think they need motivation or knowledge or some new secret system. No, what they need is to become emotionally and spiritually unwilling to continue living as they have been. That's the pivot point. That's where reinvention begins, not in adding more, but in surrendering the parts of you that are incompatible with who you want to become. The mind is clever. It says, but this is who I am. I can't help it. This is just my nature. That voice is the fossilized echo of an old identity trying to stay alive. Kill it. That voice may be familiar, but it is not your friend. It is the voice of who you were, not who you must be. Ask yourself, truly, who benefits from you remaining the same? Not your future, not your family, not your vision, only your fear, only your past. And if you continue defending your past, you are actively choosing to betray your future. And let me tell you, betrayal of your potential is one of the deepest regrets you'll ever know, because you will feel it, not all at once, but day after day in the quiet moments, in the hesitation before an opportunity, in the envy of someone who took the leap while you stood still. The human being is a creature capable of becoming something entirely new, not just improved, not just polished, but reborn. But this transformation requires a choice so radical that most never make it. It requires you to say, I am no longer available for the life I have tolerated. I am no longer a spokesperson for my limitations. I am now under reconstruction. This is difficult because the identity you've worn is not just a mask, it's a system. It is built into your habits, your thoughts, your reactions, your schedule, even the people you allow into your life. When you change who you are, all of those things will begin to resist. And that resistance is not a sign that you're wrong. It's confirmation that you're changing. But understand this, every time you step into a higher version of yourself, you will grieve the lower one. That's natural. You'll feel a pull to go back, to reattach yourself to old patterns and old relationships that fit the person you were. That's the price of evolution. The dragon you have to slay isn't just fear, it's attachment. Attachment to what's familiar, even if what's familiar is slowly killing you. There's something deeply moral about reinvention. Not moral in the sense of rule following, but in the sense of responsibility. Because if you have the capacity to become someone better, someone stronger, wiser, more disciplined, more courageous, and you don't, then you are not innocent. You are withholding your best from the world, from your loved ones, and from yourself. Reinvention is not selfish, it's sacrificial. You sacrifice the old you so that the people who depend on you, including your future self, can meet the person they truly need. Do not misunderstand this. You are not reinventing yourself because you are broken. You are reinventing yourself because you are unfinished. And that is a beautiful thing, because it means there is more of you to discover, more strength to unlock, more life to live than what you've known. There's a reason you felt the pull toward this message. Some part of you already knows the truth, that you can't go on as you are, that the walls are too tight, that your skin no longer fits, that your story has gone stale, and the next chapter is pounding at the door. But here's the thing, the next chapter won't write itself. You must pick up the pen, You must become the author, not the echo, and you must be willing to kill the previous character so the protagonist can rise. This is not about perfection. It's about the honest and deliberate shedding of the false layers. It's about refusing to apologize for outgrowing people, roles, and versions of yourself that once felt like home. It's about choosing truth over familiarity, growth over ease, and purpose over performance. And that is the cost of becoming unrecognizable. And what must come next, after you've stripped the lies from your excuses and buried the identity that protected them, is something even more dangerous. You must take full responsibility, not the kind that's fashionable, not the kind you post about, not the kind that still allows for a few things to be someone else's fault. I'm talking about the brutal, cold, liberating kind of responsibility that says, if my life is a mess, then I'm the one who allowed it to be. Because let me tell you something that cuts to the bone. Until you accept that every piece of your life is a direct reflection of what you've tolerated, chosen, neglected, or ignored, you will always feel powerless to change it. And powerlessness is a lie, a convenient one. It lets you sit still. It lets you wait for someone to save you. It lets you blame your past, your boss, your parents, your genetics, your trauma.
But you can't build a future on blame.
You build it on ownership. Ownership is not glamorous. It doesn't feel good at first. It often tastes bitter, like swallowing the truth without water. It forces you to look in the mirror and say, this is on me. Not because others didn't hurt you. Not because the world has been fair. But because the only part of the world you can control, your mind, your choices, your effort, is the part you've abandoned when you chose to live in excuses. Look around you. Your job, your body, your relationships, your bank account, your morning routine. All of it is either the product of conscious creation or unconscious allowance. Either you designed it or you tolerated it. And the line between the life you desire and the life you live is drawn exactly where you begin to say, I will no longer allow this. Responsibility is terrifying because it leaves no one else to blame. But responsibility is power because it means no one else needs to fix it. You're not waiting for permission. You're not hoping someone will change. You're not depending on fate to hand you a second chance. You are the chance. You are the permission. You are the solution. This isn't philosophy. This is practicality. When you take responsibility for everything in your life, even the things you didn't cause, you give yourself the authority to change anything. That's the paradox. It's not fair, but it's effective. Because the truth is, life doesn't care who caused your wounds. Life cares what you do with them. If you were handed pain, then build strength from it. If you were handed poverty, then build hunger from it. If you were handed rejection, then build clarity from it. Responsibility doesn't mean you chose your past. It means you now choose what it means to you. You don't get to rewrite what happened, but you get to write what happens next. And that is where transformation lives. The problem is most people are terrified of that kind of power. Because with power comes pressure. If your results are yours, then your failures are too. But so are your victories. So is your growth. So is the pride you'll feel when you look back and realize that no one saved you. You saved yourself, not with one big decision, but with 1,000 small ones, daily, quietly, consistently. That kind of power doesn't scream. It doesn't post selfies. It doesn't need applause. It works in the dark, while others are still explaining why they haven't started. And here's the truth. While you sit in excuses, someone else with less talent, fewer resources, and more pain is building the life you dream about, simply because they chose responsibility over resentment. When you understand that, when it gets into your bones, your entire posture toward life shifts. You stop waiting for the motivation to appear. You stop looking for signs. You stop needing external validation. You act not because it's easy, but because it's yours to do. And once you start, something incredible happens. Your old excuses lose their power. They become irrelevant. Because once you taste responsibility, nothing else satisfies. It rewires your brain. You start thinking, if I created this mess, I can create the opposite. You begin to look at problems as puzzles, not punishments. You start to walk into the fire, not because it's safe, but because you're done living small. You begin to realize that responsibility is not a burden. It's a weapon. And once you wield it, the world looks different. No one is coming to give you permission. And why should they? You're not here to be managed. You're here to master. The path to reinvention does not lie in waiting for circumstances to align. It lies in grabbing the steering wheel of your mind and saying, from this moment forward, I drive. And you don't have to be perfect. You don't have to know every step. You just have to decide that this is your life, your vision, your rules, and that every excuse dies at the feet of responsibility. And as you begin to drive, as you take full command of your direction, you will quickly realize something most never notice. Your environment is not neutral. It is not passive. It is not a backdrop to your life. It is active. It is shaping you, molding you, reinforcing who you are or who you've been every single day. The people you speak to, the places you return to, the sounds, the habits, the routines, they are all pulling on you, steering you, aligning you with whatever standards you've permitted. And let's be clear, your standards aren't what you write in a journal. Your standards are what you accept when no one is watching. They are not your goals. They are what you're willing to tolerate. They are written not in ink but in behavior. And your environment? It's a mirror. It reflects back exactly what you have normalized. If you surround yourself with distractions, you will become fragmented. If you surround yourself with cynics, you will become hesitant. If you surround yourself with low expectations, you will shrink to fit them. You want to reinvent yourself? Then take a hard look around. Your environment is either sculpting your transformation or suffocating it. You don't rise in isolation, you rise in context. You grow, not just by shifting your mindset, but by shifting the entire ecosystem that mindset exists within. Because your surroundings are not innocent, they are complicit. Either they are strengthening your discipline or feeding your delay. There is no neutral ground. People underestimate this. They think willpower alone can elevate them. But let me tell you, willpower is a limited resource. It's like a battery. And if your environment is draining it faster than you can recharge it, you'll collapse. You'll burn out. You'll begin to resent your own goals because they're now a war zone between who you want to become and the gravity of what surrounds you. Examine your routines. Do they serve the person you're becoming or the person you're trying to outgrow? Look at your conversations. Do they elevate you, challenge you, sharpen you? Or do they keep you sedated, amused, distracted? Look at your digital environment. Your phone, your notifications, your online consumption. Are these tools of construction or tools of destruction? If someone walked into your life and observed it for a single day, would they believe you're building something great? If the answer is no, then understand this. You cannot build a palace in a swamp. You must first drain the swamp, clear the clutter, purge the tolerable. And I don't just mean physical clutter. I mean mental clutter, social clutter, emotional clutter. The remnants of an old you still lingering in your space like ghosts, unchallenged, unseen, and yet shaping your every decision. There's no shortage of ambition in this world. What's rare is courage, the courage to raise your standards and allow the fallout to occur. Because when you raise your standards, you will trigger resistance. People will accuse you of being different, of changing. Of course you're changing. You're no longer available for the identity they were comfortable with. You're no longer available for the conversations that keep you small. You're no longer available for the chaos that kept you distracted. There's a cost to growth. The price is often paid in solitude, in walking away from what was once familiar, not because you hate it, but because you refuse to be shaped by it any longer. Reinvention is not just about adding new behaviors. It's about extracting old influences. It's about understanding that your time is sacred. Your focus is sacred. Your space is sacred. And anything that dilutes your discipline must be questioned, if not eliminated. Let me be blunt. If you are surrounded by people who mock ambition, you will begin to doubt your hunger. If you live in disorder, your mind will mirror that chaos. If you tolerate passive conversations, your internal voice will lose its edge. You cannot carry the weight of your future while dragging the baggage of your environment. Something has to give. Something must be released. You've killed the excuses. You've buried the old self. You've taken responsibility. Now, you must build a fortress around your standards, not a prison, but a domain, a space where only what strengthens you is allowed in, where your values are visible, where your goals are respected, where your boundaries are not negotiable. Because when your environment reflects your highest standards, you don't have to constantly fight for motivation. The very world around you becomes your ally. It reminds you of who you are. It compels you to rise. It becomes a declaration, This is who I am now, and I will not return to what I once tolerated. And once your environment begins to echo your highest standards, once your circle, your habits, your surroundings all begin to serve the person you're becoming, you'll find that the spotlight turns inward. No more blame, no more distractions. It's just you and your actions every single day. And this is where the true transformation begins, not in grand declarations, not in moments of intensity, but in the invisible rituals that nobody sees, in the quiet repetition of discipline, because discipline is the chisel that sculpts the unrecognizable version of yourself. People misunderstand discipline. They think it's punishment. They think it's the enemy of freedom. But in reality, it is the birthplace of freedom. Discipline is not suppression, it's alignment. It's the ability to organize your behavior in service of your values even when your emotions resist. Because let's be honest, there will be days where your feelings are a storm. Days when nothing inside you wants to move, to create, to build. And it is in those moments, precisely those moments, that your identity is forged. What do you do when no one is watching? What do you choose when comfort whispers? That is who you are, not the image, not the intent, not the plan. The action. The consistent, often thankless, invisible action. You show me a person who is becoming unrecognizable, and I'll show you a person whose discipline outlasted their moods. This is not glamorous work. There's no applause. You will not be celebrated for waking up early, for choosing focus over distraction, for saying no to indulgence, but you will begin to feel it in your posture, in your energy, in the quiet confidence that comes not from pretending, but from knowing you did the work, that you earned your growth. And don't misunderstand. Discipline isn't about being rigid or robotic. It's about training the self to obey what the higher self commands. You are composed of layers. There's the part of you that seeks comfort, escape, ease. And then there's the part of you that has vision, direction, values. Discipline is the bridge between those two. It is how you say, I respect my future more than I indulge my present urges. Because make no mistake, your future self is either being built or betrayed by your current discipline. Every skip task, every excuse, every moment you choose ease over purpose, you are not just pausing your progress, you are actively dismantling the person you could have been. And every time you push forward even a little, especially when it's hard, you are pouring concrete into the foundation of a self that can't be shaken. This is why so many fail to transform. Because discipline is quiet and ego is loud. Because discipline is humble and the world rewards spectacle. But the unrecognizable version of yourself is not born from spectacle. It is born from structure, from order, from choosing alignment over chaos again and again, even when the world tempts you to break that structure. And let's talk about this temptation because it's real. The modern world is designed to fracture your attention, to reward your impulsiveness, to condition you into seeking dopamine instead of fulfillment. Everything around you says, just this once, it doesn't matter. And if you buy into that lie often enough, just this once becomes your identity. It becomes who you are. But if you can train your mind to stay on the path, to follow through, especially when no one is watching, you become something rare, something dangerous. Because now you no longer need permission. You no longer wait for ideal conditions. You no longer hope for motivation. You become self-sufficient, self-commanding. You move forward whether the world applauds or not. Discipline is the ultimate act of self-respect. It is how you say to yourself, I am worth the effort. It is how you rise above the noise of the past, the pull of your weaknesses, and the inertia of your old patterns. It is not something you do when it's convenient. It is something you become through repetition, through resistance, through refusal to negotiate with your lesser impulses. And here's the truth you must accept. If you want to evolve, there is no transformation without discipline. You can dream, plan, speak, write, visualize, but without discipline, all of it is fantasy. Discipline is the execution. It's the part that brings the vision down from the sky and builds it into the ground. You don't become unrecognizable because of what you intend. You become unrecognizable because of what you consistently do, especially when it's hard, when it's thankless, when it's lonely. And it will be lonely at times. Growth often is, but it is in that solitude that your new self begins to emerge. Not fully formed, not perfect, but real. Discipline is the daily vote for that version of you. And the more votes you cast, the more natural it becomes. until one day you wake up and realize that the old self can no longer survive in the life you've built. It simply doesn't fit. The journey to becoming unrecognizable begins with the brutal honesty to kill your excuses, the courage to bury your former self, and the boldness to take full responsibility for every outcome in your life. But it is discipline, consistent, invisible, relentless discipline, that ultimately separates those who wish from those who become. When your environment reflects your standards and your actions align with your future, transformation is no longer a fantasy. It becomes inevitable. The world doesn't reward potential. It rewards proof. And the only proof that matters is what you build when no one is watching. Become that person. Start now. Thank you.